Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. As always, thank you for spending time with us. The real colluders. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Well, as usual, Trump was right.
They spied on my campaign.
Well, there's no real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
No.
It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir,
they spied on my campaign and they got caught.
Can I say something? You know, this is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't put on things we can't verify.
Leslie, they spied on my campaign.
Well, we can't verify
It's been totally verified.
No.
We can't verify it because we don't want to verify it. The 60 Minutes stopwatch broke again. Now, as usual, the media were covering for the Democrats, as they always do. Lesley Stahl and the rest of the corporate media simply took as gospel whatever Obama's henchmen were claiming about Trump and Russian collusion. And it was all a lie. Just a few weeks ago, we learned that CIA Director John Ratcliffe sent a criminal referral letter to FBI Chief Kash Patel regarding former CIA Chief John Brennan and former FBI Director Jim Comey for their actions in the Trump-Russia probe. Now, these potentially include making false statements to Congress. Then the bombshell on Friday from Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, where she released evidence showing that in the months leading up to the November 2016 election, President Obama and top national security staff manufactured and politicized intel to lay the foundation for a year-long coup attempt against President Trump. And Gabbard put meat on the bones in an interview with our own Maria Bartiromo.
The intelligence community agreed that there was no intelligence that reflected that Russia was trying to hack the election in favor of either candidate. The evidence showed, the intelligence showed that, again, Russia did not have either the intent nor the capability to be able to impact the outcome of the United States election. So it was very striking when we look back again at the documents that I declassified and released that shows there was a shift in early December, the first week of December.
How strange a shift. Now, why was President Obama and his intel staff not satisfied with the assessments about Russia and whether Russia was interfering or not? But then another intel review took place.
Again, another document was produced by the intelligence community, a president's daily brief that was consistent with every other assessment that was done previously leading up to the election. Russia did not, this is after the election now, did not attempt to affect the outcome of the American election. That was never published.
And what happened to that assessment, which again found no Russian involvement in our election? Well, it turns out they didn't like the conclusions the intel agencies had made, so they decided to find new conclusions. Now, Director Gabbard says that hours before the intel would have gone into that presidential daily brief, a senior intel official pulled it, claiming, they received new guidance.
The very next day, this meeting was called, a National Security Council meeting, bringing together all of the senior leaders of President Obama's cabinet, and the topic that was put forward was a sensitive matter. The tasks that came out of that meeting was coming from President Obama directing the intelligence community, then Obama's ODNI director Clapper, to produce a document, to produce an intelligence assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow affected the outcome of the election that had already occurred, electing Donald Trump to the presidency.
Yeah, this is what they call a conspiracy, my friends. Now, the goal apparently was to lay the factual predicate, in this case based on statements they knew were lies, to cripple or even topple the Trump presidency, as Tulsi called it, aptly, a coup. And now Fox News has confirmed that the Department of Justice has indeed received a criminal referral from the DNI regarding the manipulation of these intelligence reports.
There must be indictments, those responsible, no matter how powerful they are and were at that time, no matter who was involved in creating this treasonous conspiracy against the American people, they all must be held accountable.
They must be held accountable. These are the headlines. 100% true. These people were so brazen, they felt entitled to pull out every stop, including, if that was necessary, I guess, manufacture intel in order to stop President Trump. And when Trump questioned them, well, when he hit back, they fell back into their usual line. How dare you? How dare you even think about questioning us? The world is watching.
There is no basis for Mr. Trump to point fingers at the intelligence community. The world is watching now what Mr. Trump says and listening very carefully. If he doesn't have confidence in the intelligence community, what signal does that send to our partners and allies as well as our adversaries?
Well, complicit in all of this, the man who would chair the impeachment inquiry, another fraud, Adam Schiff.
The president-elect has really denigrated the intelligence community, has called their integrity into question, has basically said he doesn't believe the intelligence on Russian hacking.
But the slimiest of all was Barack Obama himself. When he knew the IC had already concluded it was highly unlikely that Russia had interfered in the election, Obama, by omission, still planted the seeds that it had.
Clinton lose because of the hacking?
I'm going to let all the political pundits in this town have a long discussion about what happened in the election. It was a fascinating election, so I'm sure there are going to be a lot of books written about it.
Right then and there, Barack Obama should have stated for the record that the intelligence community had in fact concluded that there was no evidence that Russia had thrown the election for Trump. But he didn't like the outcome of the election, and he wanted to leave the impression, and this is very important, that the election of Donald Trump was illegitimate.
Unless the American people genuinely think that the professionals in the CIA, the FBI, our entire intelligence infrastructure, many of whom, by the way, served in previous administrations and who are Republicans, are less trustworthy than the Russians, then people should pay attention to what our intelligence agencies say.
See how he's smart, right? Because he doesn't quite come out and say it, but he wants to leave the impression with, well, listen to them. It's amazing. And let's not forget how after they knew the truth, again, that Russia had not affected the election, that Comey and Obama discussed not sharing key intel with National Security Advisor Michael Flynn because he had talked to his Russian counterpart a number of times before the inauguration. And that poisonous seed again planted by Obama and his band of democracy subverters, that germinated into what would ultimately be the takedown of Flynn to hurt Trump, right, at the very get-go. And ultimately, the launching of the special counsel and the Mueller investigation. It was all built on a fraud greenlit by Obama and his IC collaborators. The Democrats had their talking point.
We saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign eagerly intending to collude, possibly, with Russia.
You can see evidence in plain sight on the issue of collusion, pretty compelling evidence.
The current president of the United States has taken the word of the Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community.
I believe that the president is compromised by the Russians.
Once again, everything Democrats accuse Trump of, subverting the election, hurting democracy, is what they did. But they all felt entitled to do things that are the opposite of by the books. We'll get into that in a moment, because for them, the definition of democracy is only really, it means this. It's basically a government that pushes a totally progressive agenda. And if the government is not doing that, pushing a totally progressive agenda, then it's not really democracy, and it needs to be taken down by any means necessary. That's why there were special rules for Hillary Clinton destroying all that evidence, for mishandling classified information. That's why there was special treatment for Biden when he was found holding classified docs next to that Corvette. But now, there must be accountability for what went down here. The DOJ's investigation must be straightforward, not affected by politics, because of course if it is, the Democrats will run with that. It must be driven only by the facts and the law, with the intent of those involved closely examined. And before you say, oh, Laura, isn't this too backward looking? We gotta look at the forward. No, you know what I say? It's exactly the opposite of backward looking. Because if Democrats and Republicans want to preserve in the future our intel agencies, and I have my doubts about that, frankly, whether they're worth it, but if the Democrats and Republicans think it's important that those intel agencies have the public's trust, then these agencies need to be taken apart and cleaned out section by section. Fire anyone with his or her own agenda, fire anyone whose professional judgment or objectivity is questionable, demand much more oversight from Congress, and if you can't get the answers you're looking for in Congress, start defunding these agencies. That'll get their attention, and that's the angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.